saying that shit makes you free. And when that don't work, I take a second to breathe, yeah. Breathe in, breathe out. Couple rain clouds ain't gonna get me down. I say, breathe in, breathe out. I'm getting back to me. All the things I do, all the things I say.
I've been to a concert.
So, we were talking about the years where me and you weren't friends and the transition it was for you. And that kind of brings us to where, like, our friendship started again. And, like, I was in a different spot, or I was trying to get to a different spot. So, like, our friendship definitely changed drastically. Let's find out more about where you were at the beginning of that, because I've opened up about it. So, like, how were you doing mentally, like, when me and you became friends again, when our relationship, like, restarted? We could talk about your mental health from that point leading up to, like, closer to, like, when I stopped, like, started doing this stuff, and, like, you really saw it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that was right when I went back to Rivergirl, and I hadn't worked in a bar or restaurant for the first time in, let's see, that would have been, so for almost 2 years. Okay. I didn't work in a restaurant. I did construction with my uncle, and I had that fucking awful job in Jersey, the photography job. But at that point I had also just moved back home when I went back to Rivergirl.
All right, so your mental health from, like, probably, like, 2020, like, going through the pandemic to, like, when we started hanging out again was probably, like, 2022. Because, like, I know you had called me on my birthday during the pandemic, which was in May. Mm-hmm. So, like, I guess we were still kind of talking at that point. It was probably, like, later 2021. Like, later 2020, 2021, until we started talking again.
Yeah, something like that. No, because, well, no.
Maybe you just called me on my birthday because it was my birthday.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that very clearly. Yeah, I was standing out on my patio. It was a beautiful day. I was
outside in Virginia.
But I also feel like before that, we probably hadn't talked for a while.
Yeah.
That was probably when it was, like, fading out. And then, like, after that, like, we probably just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I talked to you again. I definitely didn't call you on your birthday. I might have texted you.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't put a lot of stock into that, bro. I don't give a shit. But I bet you knew it was my birthday, though.
Yeah.
You knew it was.
I was like, nah, it's 9/11.
Never forget JP's birthday. So when I made my way back there, like, I did construction with my uncle up until, like, that winter, and then I went back to Rivergirl in, I think that was January or February. Well, that's when, like, because that's when I was there hanging out with Sean, and I was there to talk to Mark about going back.
Yeah.
And then you were there. Jake was bartending. I was just in a place where I was like, I didn't really want to go back, but I knew that, like, I basically took the easy way out. That's how I look at it now. Like, and I could not be more grateful, though, for the fact that I did, because, like, not only who knows what would have happened next if I didn't go back there. Like, I may have never, who knows what would have happened between the two of us. But I'm so grateful that I went back there, because, like, so many other, like, good friendships and good things, including this podcast, came from that. Like, there's no way that if I kind of did anything else. That it just allowed that little bit of us for us to, like, reconnect. That little bit of space where I was, like, back working, where, like, me and you worked together for years. That allowed for that space to, and I wasn't necessarily super happy with going back there, and, like, I was just, I needed a job. I'm really glad that I did, though, because who knows what would have happened. But, like, mentally, I was probably in a space where, like, but I mean, by that point, I kind of wasn't really drinking as much as I like used to. Because kind of a lot of that faded away once I stopped working in restaurants, and it kind of was popping up here and there. But like by that point, I had developed like a much stronger practice with just probably meditating in general. Like I hadn't really like my journaling was kind of there. Like I was doing a lot of reading. When I went back there, I was in a space where I was like, I'm just here to work. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to come to work and leave. And like, obviously that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Like, but in the best way possible. I don't look at that as a negative. And I think that like the biggest step, like somewhere around there, like if we're talking, so shortly after me and you, like probably like right around when it was your birthday and I called you that time. It's probably right around when I started seeing a therapist.
Okay.
That's probably like I know that it was like June or July of 2020.
So would you say going to therapy was the first step of you starting like to figure yourself out? Like that was the first like real step you had taken outside of meditation.
That was the
Try and figure out what was going on with you.
that was the first step where like I really involved somebody else.
What was that like?
I mean, when I think about like the people who I'm thankful for, like my therapist, like she's up there because at the point where I decided that I was gonna actually let me go back a little further. Actually, there was a point when I went through a bad breakup before 2020 where was having such a hard time with it that I was like, you know what? Somebody had mentioned like therapy to their therapist to me or something like that, and I like made an appointment with her. And by the time the appointment happened, we had gotten back together, and I just didn't go. So I kind of just like kept like falling into that loop of like just kind of placing all of your energy into a relationship, and then when it goes sour or disappears, whatever it is, you're left feeling super empty. But so I didn't go then, and then like that cycle continued, and I found myself in that summer of 2020 in a similar space that I was in a couple of years back when I said like I need to like go talk to somebody. So I tried out BetterHelp, and funny enough, like because they ask you to write something about yourself, about why you need to go, or like your story, whatever it is. And I remember that I wrote something, and then the therapist was like, "Whoa, that was a lot." Like I wrote so much. I turned it into like my whole life story. Just because like at that point, like I couldn't, you're trying to pinpoint what about this is making this so hard, and you don't want to skip over anything. That like I had a very different like
You were fucked up.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It was I had a very definition of what I thought therapy was going to be like then before I started going, than when like after I actually started going and seeing and talking to a real person.
They said, give us 180 characters, and you wrote them a 10-page essay.
No, it was definitely meant to be like a little more in depth than that, but like I took it over the top. Like, but at the time, like I probably wasn't journaling or anything like that, and like knowing myself now, like how badly I need to journal all the time on a regular basis, it was probably just like a fucking vomit of all this stuff of your family and your relationships and your friends and blah blah blah, and it goes down all these rabbit holes. But then in that summer of 2020, I found myself at a point where like I was like, I can't keep doing this with myself. Like I know that I can't solve this on my own, like, and I'm clearly like there's clearly some blind spots in where I'm at. So I probably reached out and sent a couple emails to a few different people, and a bunch of them called me. But Anne-Marie, my therapist now, called me a bunch of times and left me at least 2 voicemails. And I was like, that was probably one of the first times where I said, this is a sign from the universe that I need to be doing this. because like I wouldn't call it hounding me, but like the other people, none of the other people who I reached out to, like
just
they left,
touched base.
they
'cause
like
had
they
to.
were like, if you're interested, and then I never heard from them again. And it was probably just like the little extra push that I needed. And so I started going, and like a lot of what I first started sorting out was like going back into your past and like, you know, what was it like for you as a kid? Where does, you know, and we started to like translate how, and I started to understand myself a little better, like how what I'm doing now is happening because of X, Y, and Z. Whether it was your childhood or your teenage years or even a couple years ago, maybe 6 months ago. And just like learning about that conditioning and that like ruminating. And I learned a lot about like just putting all of your energy into things that you can't control and then being upset by it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of, because now I've been going for, now it's over 3 years. That entire time I probably haven't gone a whole month without having at least one session.
Good for you, man.
Thanks,
Way to
man.
show up for yourself every week.
Yeah, no, like I look forward to it. Like, and I even make the drive, because it's like it's not necessarily, it's not right around the corner. But no, it changed my life, and it forced me to, like, I think it just gave me a little bit of a perspective that, like, number one, you're overthinking all of this about how everybody cares about what you're doing, and also that you have to be kind of honest with yourself and just like look at, if you can't like at least give yourself a little bit of perspective. And because I felt like I spent a lot of my time like wrapped up in my own world of like this narrative and story that I was telling myself, and like going to therapy just gave me enough of that window into being like, you're not the center of the universe, but you also have all these things in your control that you're not doing, and you're worrying about like all these external things that really aren't up to you, and that creates a whirlwind of not all three of those things not connecting. That like if you're trying to control, like you got to worry about the things that you can do something about. You can't worry about whether or not that person loves you back or not. You just got to hope that the universe aligns with that. And I know I'm kind of like simplifying that, but at the same time, like all these, you know, I think about all these years that I forced myself into this pressure and tried to like have a chokehold on like the life that I wanted to have, and you know how I wanted it to go and what I wanted to be doing and how I wanted to spend that time. And then before you know it, like not only did you not enjoy that, but then at the same time you're trying to steer a ship that you have no control over, because there's so many other factors like in the universe that aren't you. And you just kind of have to accept that when something bad or horrible happens, that's just, there's some reason there, even if it's horrible. Like it just wasn't meant to be, you know. You can't rush or force or, you know, drag a situation into happening. And I've struggled with that my whole life. Like it's like over the last couple of years since I started going to therapy, it's gotten a lot better. I've really been able to, like, you can't control who walks in the door, but you can control like how you respond to it. And
all right, so now that we're kind of caught up a little bit, everybody kind of knows a little bit more about you. I think it's a good time to get more into the present. So this is a podcast about mental health. And if we're going to let people know more about you, they should know about your mental health.
true.
So, how messed up are you? No, I'm joking.
This is exactly how my therapy sessions go.
So, like,
Yeah.
you started going to therapy, and that's been a big switch for you. And you started that 3 years ago, so you've been taking the time for 3 years to show up every day and make sure you're bettering yourself. How has that helped your mental health? How did that inspire you to do other things to continue changing your mental health? Like, where are you trying to go with this? Like how much do you like care about yourself now opposed to when you did before you started like taking the time to really get to know you? Now that you know you a little bit better, like how nice is that? Like,
Oh man, and I mean like having that kind of like self-awareness now to step outside myself and not be so like internal is the like I've spent like almost my entire life, and like I said, it's not that it's completely gone, but it's like I would say mostly, or at least I'm able to catch myself when like I start to go down a certain path of thoughts that number one isn't healthy, but also just isn't like realistic. You know, when you start to have these, you start to like imagine these scenarios and you try to figure out how you'd handle them. And now I don't like. The easiest way that I can explain it is that I realize that I'm not my thoughts, and that my thoughts are a product of everything that has happened to me over the course of my life, whether it was in my control or not, and that they're trying to protect me, but they're not always valid. And that it's kind of like that thing that I always talk about, which is that like the fear that we have today over how we're going to be perceived and how we're going to be judged happens biologically the same way that fear would happen like when you're trying to survive as like a caveman. So I feel like I'm just able to catch better when I'm spiraling through those thoughts, and I'm able to say to myself like, no, like, where are you going? Like, you know who you are. Like, I don't follow that path of like I am this long train of negative thoughts. I'm able to catch that and be like, that is so unrealistic. And like, if you were to tell somebody what you just thought of and ask them if they thought that it was realistic, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know? And I feel like I spent so long in that space of not being able to make sense of my own thoughts and just being like, why does this make me so upset? Like, why am I so, fucked up by this? Like, why do I latch onto this thing so hard? And we all wonder, like, why are we the way that we are? But like, you have to give yourself a little self-compassion that it's not all like you're not to blame for every single piece of information or thought that pops into your head, but you're able to control how you respond to that and how you handle like the real things that are right in front of you. So I think like a big thing with me and my therapist was like being in the present moment and not being caught up in how things were going to go and how things went yesterday or 6 months ago. But now I'm also able to, I think I have a better grasp on convincing myself of, for lack of a better word, the things that keep me sane, that keep me on the right course. And even on the days when I don't necessarily feel like it, still doing that and taking the time to, like, knowing full well that, like, on the days where I don't want to journal is exactly the time when you need to be, because that means you're avoiding something. Like, I know how much I like to write. Like, I can write every single day if I need to. And taking the time to, like, learn something new and being intentional about like not, I don't like sit around doing nothing like I used to and then point the finger at somebody else for not giving me an opportunity. Like I feel like I'm more active in my life. Like I'm once I became more familiar with like what was in my control and like really being honest with myself about that was when I started to realize that like, oh, but wait, there's this whole other thing that like you were lying to yourself about, that like, oh, I am the way that I am. Like, no, you have the power to change and be like, no, you want to wake up in the morning and make your bed every morning? You can be that person. You want to wake up and meditate? You can be that person. You want to be the type of person who wakes up and, works out or reads or does whatever it is that helps you be a better version of yourself and helps you grow. On the days when you don't want to do it, that's exactly when you should be doing it. Mm-hmm. It's not. I feel like kind of what I'm saying is that like just like shut up and do it, but it's also just like that. That is kind of that's discipline, and that's the cornerstone of all of this. Mm-hmm. Is on the days when you don't want to do it, knowing what's good for you. And like, have you ever meditated and then regretted it, or done yoga, or read from your 7 spiritual laws? Whatever. Nobody ever. You never regret because you're doing something intentionally for yourself, and that sends a message to your brain. And if you don't do that, you don't take the time and carve that out for yourself, then other things that are distracting and not as important make their way in.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of distractions. So, I mean, we're going to have other podcasts. There's other things that we'll talk about at other times. I feel like this is a good episode where we're at. Like, people have a better clue of who you are now. I don't have too many more questions about, like deep diving. But, I mean, like, let's just talk about you now, like what are you striving for right now? Like how do you deal with your emotions while you're going toward a goal, like for this podcast, for instance? Like how do you handle your situations and your emotions now and like the present, now that you've learned these things about yourself and that you're willing to learn more?
Yeah, that's a good one, because like right now I'm not working, but I got to figure out something in terms of employment. But I kind of in a different way feel like I'm busier than I ever have been, because like I spend a couple hours a day working on this stuff, and now that we're editing with multiple cameras and doing stuff like that, all this, and it's growing. I never have like an issue with, like last night I was literally watching that movie Licorice Pizza. Mm-hmm. I love that movie. I've watched it multiple times, and I was like, this is a feel good movie, I'm gonna put this on and relax out. And I got about an hour into it and I said, nah, I want to start cutting episode 13. Mm-hmm. And like I don't have to, when it's things that I'm passionate about, I don't really have to force myself to spend time on it. Usually it's often been the opposite, which was like I've had things that I'm passionate about, but I didn't have the time for them. And this is like a really nice like transitionary period to like I'm able to like what we've been able to grow with this podcast like has a lot to do with the fact that like I've been able to really carve out time for it, and I love that. Like that makes me happier than anything. And like even my therapist said the other day, she's like, when you talk about this, you're more passionate than I've heard you talk. I've known you for 3 years. This is the most passionate I've seen you about anything. So I always think about, it's very easy for me to think of my future self in terms of this. Mm-hmm. In other areas, sometimes it's very hard for me to imagine.
Maybe that's because this is the future.
It is. But this feels very real. Like I can picture myself interviewing people who we want to be interviewing. Mm. That's something that's there. And I feel like because now we've done it so many times, and I can really like latch onto this and put work into it and see the improvement every week and see the I can really like, and I don't it's the first time where I don't feel this like this pressure of perfection, because I know that next week we're filming again and I'm going to have another chance to make this better. And I'm going to like, it's not like a one-time thing that is going to like fade away if we don't do something right this time around. Like, it gives me an opportunity to see that the growth of not only the podcast in general, but you can even see it in terms of like, I have the privilege of being able to like cut the episodes and stuff like that. So I can almost see the difference in myself from now versus when we first started this. I can see it in you. And like, that also makes me think though, like, we're putting, you know, this energy into it now. Where are we going to be at in a year? Where are we going to be at in 5 years? It gives me this awesome type of hope in my career that I've never had before. And a big part of that is because you pushed me through this door. And if you had told me in, you know, August of this year, when we hadn't done any of this, none of this was real, we weren't, you know, it was just an idea at that point. If you told me that I'd be sitting here fucking crying in my living room, we were going to put this out on the internet, I'd be like, fuck you. No, we're not doing it. And there's no way that I'm on that road without this as a vessel for that. And being able to, you know, I also have the lucky privilege of that, like, you're very tolerant of not only my like specificity in terms of how we do this, but in terms of giving me creative freedom in how we make the episodes. And it's the first time where like I have a real, like, tangible thing that I can, if a random person on the street is like, what do you do? I can say like, I have this.
Yeah.
This is like, we weren't trying to do this. Like, we did this. We're here. When you get to something like this, you think like, I guess maybe that's why all of that other stuff happened. Is that like, if whatever path I went on otherwise, maybe with more success in the film industry, or maybe with me and you go separate ways, but there's no way that I'm at this point with myself without this, you know, thing that we created out of thin air, with nothing more than just an idea. And I have all sorts of other plans of, you know, other creative things outside of this podcast. And it's not even like we've endured all this like amazing success, but to just have it and be able to like bring this energy to something every week is life-changing for me. Like, I don't know, you know, for years you wonder, where am I gonna like put this creative energy, or where am I gonna find like hope in something that will make me believe that I can, you know, get something else made or have success in another area, but nobody's gonna give me an opportunity. How do I get to that point? And to see this created now is just like, like I said, man, it gives me so much hope, and it gives my brain so much more space for creativity that for years I just like, I felt like it was on the other side of the world. Like, I couldn't find it. And this is, if you want to go do that thing, like, go do it. Like, don't waste any more time.
Who thought we'd be here?
Yeah, man. Who thought we'd be here? Like,
Well, man, I just want to give you your flowers. Jose talked about that last week, and thank you for opening up today. You know,
thank you for doing this, man.
you are not, you're not somebody I don't think a lot of people would think would open up the way that you did, and for you to do that is probably encouraging to somebody somewhere, because if they can see you opening up like this, I'm sure that they gives them hope that they can open up like that.
Yeah, like, there's so much more love that exists in the space of being your authentic self than it ever is in, like, trying to fit in. Like, I promise that's where it is.
Oh, that was a great episode, man.
Yeah,
It was a great episode.
that's not where I expected it to go.
Is there anything else you want to say just before we wrap up, you know? Anything you want to tell anybody?
I think I've opened up enough today.
There you go,
This
man.
was a lot. I feel no, I'm not gonna ruin it. I'm not gonna try to force anything, right?
No, just leave it as it is. You know, this is Who Thought We'd Be Here episode. What are we on? 14 now.
This is 14. Yeah,
14. Started in the woods.
started in the woods.
Now
Yeah.
we're here, making JP cry on camera.
I did not think that. I didn't even realize that it would kind of go in that direction. But I tried my best to go into it without expectations for anything.
Yeah, well,
Like,
it's good to be open. I bet you feel a lot better now.
yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
certainly
man.
do. Yeah.
And it makes you grateful. Makes you grateful because you got to
Yeah.
sit back and look at how far you've come. You know,
Yeah,
like you
but
said.
okay, I can say that. I'll leave it with that, which is that, like, I'm very grateful for what we've created here. I'm very grateful for both of you guys and, like, the platform and the community that we've created. It may be small now, but
Yeah, that's a good plug right there. We are joining Grouped. We will soon have a subscription. You'll get exclusive content, early release to episodes, early release to merch and stuff when that starts coming out. It's also a free option too. You can go on there. It's just a platform that we really like the idea behind, and we've decided to hop on board with them. So you can still listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere, but we will eventually be on Grouped as well. Just want to give a little nod to that.
yeah, you might have to be on group to see all the tiers.
Yeah, at some point. But who thought we'd be here, you know?
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Emotional melancholy.
All that glitters and gold. I had money, been broke. I've been high, been low. I done pimped it, been whole. I done prayed and been prayed on. I fell off and I stayed on.